And I'm going to walk you through some examples of the different kind of transport we found. But basically we have our two general categories that share in overwhelming. And then we have the different source areas. And of course from the south in Mexico. And then from the north in the South Coast via the Coachella Valley and Palm Springs. And very interesting for us, we saw numerous examples of contributions from the west, either San Diego and or Mexico. Generally, the border area, with one or two exceptions, we see an overwhelming impact from Mexico on all ozone violation days. And just given when we do our trajectories or weather analysis and just the density of emissions in Mexicali versus the border area in California, we feel the evidence is very compelling that those are overwhelmed by Mexico. In terms of El Central and Westmoreland, the results seem to be more varied and complex. And I'll walk you through a few of our results. Actually, I'm going to give you an example of each type to show you, and you'll see how El Centro and Westmoreland tend to have multiple influences. Are there any questions at this point?
You seemed a bit surprised by influence from west, from San Diego.
Just how often we saw it. I have read a previous study that did find quite a bit of influence, impact. It's just, with our methods, it's hard to ascertain where the emissions are coming from. You know, it's a long way to San Diego.
Yeah. Is it possibly truck traffic and things like that?
It could be. Yeah, it could be along the highway.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's more out of curiosity. In regards to Mexico's exceedance, that it's obvious along the border and then the new border as well, the truck crossing. No, but both borders,
okay.
there's exceedances there, obviously, aside from whatever's produced internally. But just out of curiosity, how do you determine at that point who owns that?
Oh, maybe I'll show you the first case.
And the reason I'm saying is, they're coming into the U.S. And,
the truck traffic.
Yeah, the truck and vehicle, but in regards to, when you talk about exceedances when it comes to Mexico, then we're looking at exemptions.
I think that will probably, something like that will have to be maybe called out with more of the photochemical modeling, because what we're looking at was the weather conditions sufficient to have transported in. Just that border area, just the emission density seems to be, it seems like it's basically a shared parcel at the border.
Like I said,
yeah.
Question out of curiosity.
But we do have, the weather data seems to be fairly compelling on that case. But if I don't answer it, maybe we can come back to that.
Well, I'm sure the answer is later.
Now, I don't know if you're all aware that the federal standard is an 8-hour standard. We monitor ozone continuously every hour, and then we average it over an 8-hour period. And then, oops, what did I do? No, help me. Okay. And so it's an 8-hour kind of average. And because of that, we look at the whole 8-hour period when we do our assessment results, as well as the day prior to the assessment. Okay, now this is an example of a trajectory analysis. And what a trajectory analysis does is there was an exceedance at Calexico during this day, which was, you can see the date there. And what the trajectory does is it takes weather data from over 50 sites and it interpolates it and estimates the path that the air particle took prior to the time of that exceedance. And we run a trajectory starting at every hour of the 8-hour period. Generally, they're very similar to each other, so I'd just be showing you one each, with one exception. And where you see the little arrow is where the trajectory started, and in fact, all the way into Mexico, Mexicali, and it spends very little time in Imperial County, except right at the border area and only for a few hours. Other conditions on this day were that the ozone concentrations were basically limited to the border area. So El Centro and Westmoreland did not have a violation on this day. And the weather data that we analyzed pretty much supports the trajectory. The winds were light and they were blowing from the south in Mexico northward to the border area, but they were very light. And when we looked at the ozone profile patterns, these sites generally show similar patterns between Mexicali and Calexico, indicating that they likely share a similar emission source. So we think this is a very compelling case of overwhelming transport from Mexico. Next, although we think, most all the Calexico sites are basically overwhelmed by Mexico, actually more of the violations now occur at Westmoreland and El Centro. And I apologize, the labels for the towns may not be real accurate. I had my staff kind of stylize this a little bit so you could see it easier, make it a little darker than how it comes out of the trajectory. But the trajectory does back up into Mexico, and so you may be asking, well, why isn't this an overwhelming day? But actually, the trajectory spends many hours in Imperial County just prior to the violation, from 14 to 20 hours. And you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but there's like a clustering a little bit darker on the very top of the trajectory. And so we don't have enough evidence to say that this was overwhelmed by Mexico, because there was ample opportunity for activities in Imperial County to have contributed to this violation. Also, the concentrations at the border area were low, below the federal standard, and higher in El Centro and Westmoreland.
Hey, Gail, this is Winky from EPA. Are you on slide 13?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the sort of blob of blue under Westmoreland indicates that the air mass kind of hung out there for a while?
Yeah, 14 to 16 hours.
Okay, okay.
But this is definitely a type of violation that I think we'll get much more insight from the photochemical modeling. But because of the amount of time it's spent in Imperial County, we're classifying this as shared contribution from Mexico and a contribution from Imperial. Now here's an interesting case from overwhelming transport from the South Coast to Westmoreland. Ozone concentrations on this day, again, were very low near the border in El Centro, and the only site that exceeded was Westmoreland, and it just barely exceeded, just slightly above the standard. And ozone concentrations were also elevated at Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley. And the weather data shows that the winds were coming into Imperial County from the north to northwest, from the coastal region of the South Coast through the Coachella Valley. And this is pretty much shown by the trajectory there.